Welcome to Waiver Watch episode 21 on April 5th, 2020. We are 107 Waivers, and each week we bring to you some of the most interesting waivers approved by the FAA in the weeks prior. And yes, it's been a slower than normal approval process in the past couple of weeks here. We have seen our lowest numbers. So Jakey, before I spoil the news, why don't you fill us in with the weekly waiver totals?
All right, so previous week we had 27 waivers only. So the pandemic situation here is definitely settled in. Things are slowing down a little bit, but there was some good ones actually. So we had 21 daylight operations waivers. We had 2 for 107.35. That's simultaneous operation of multiple small UAS. We had 2 Para Zero Safe Air 107.39 Alpha approvals. We had 1 high altitude approval and 1 BVLOS with Observer Human Beings approval. So despite kind of a slow week, actually a pretty good variety there. And it would have been really nice to have 28 approved, although I'll let Brent fill you in on that misstep.
Yeah, so 28 would have been great to have this week. Unfortunately, it was one of our waivers that was sitting in the queue. It was under review. And not only the content of this waiver would have been super exciting to share with you, but also the number. We'll give away the number waiver that it was, but we're not going to tell you what was inside of it quite yet. But we did secure 107W 2020-00001. I think it's 4 zeros and 1.
4 zeros
yeah.
and 1, yep.
We had the first waiver issued, or at least drafted in 2020. Sadly enough, we found out this week that we were denied.
Oh,
so
again,
that's just how it goes sometimes. We're a little bit upset about it, but not too bad. At the end of the day, we learned a few things. We got some good feedback, and hopefully in the future we will have that waiver approved, but it won't be 0001. It'll probably be like 10,000 or something. I don't know.
I think we're just about the 2000s these days. So
yeah. So what we're going to cover in this waiver watch today is the North Dakota waivers. There's clean sweep. We already covered that in the waiver totals. Nothing too much there. Mm-hmm. But we have the 2 waivers that are 107.35. Those are actually spraying with a drone waivers. So those are super interesting. We're going to jump into that. And the last section we have is Mavic Mini. Can it map? Stay tuned to figure out what the answer is.
Can it map? That'll be a good one.
We do have a question for you. Jakey, hit us with that question that we want to ask to the community.
Yeah, so this is always an interesting point of, I'll say, subjectivity with the FAA, the community. So we just want to ask it. How far is visual line of sight to you? Give us a number, leave us a comment, shoot us a note, just any way you can, but just give us a number. How far is visual line of sight to you? Feel free to qualify your statement, whatever. Give us more than a little, but we're looking for a number at the end of the day. So
yeah,
let us
drop
know what
a
you
comment.
think.
Yeah, drop a comment below in the YouTube. We'll see if we can get a poll put together. Maybe there's a link, but definitely put the comments in the YouTube video link. Also, I'll give a little 2 cents and qualify my statement on what do I think is visual line of sight. So I've been out doing some routine mapping of some infrastructure this week, and I'm using a Phantom. And I'm finding that, 2,000 feet, I feel really comfortable. Like, I can see it, I can tell its orientation, direction, heading, all that good stuff. But then I start creeping out to like 2,500. This is, less than half a mile. And it's the days that I've been flying, it's been completely bluebird skies, really sunny, a little bit of sun shining towards me. I do have a baseball cap and sunglasses on. But I definitely would say I cannot fly out to 3,000 feet in these conditions. Now, cloudy skies, sun to your back, other things, nighttime, that might be a different story. But like this is like 11 a.m. In the Midwest. So That is my statement, I guess. Right now, I wouldn't feel comfortable going over, let's say, 2,500 feet from my position, at least in the conditions I was in. So,
yeah, and speaking of Mavic Mini, so, and this is the problem, it depends is the answer, but it's always, we still want to get a number from y'all, but the Mavic Mini, it's like less than 1,000 feet, and you can really see that thing. It's just so small, so it's such a variable number, so.
Right, super hard for, that's why there's no rule, right?
Yep.
There's no prescriptive limit because it, like you said, depends. Size of drone, cloud conditions, the sun, is it in your face? Is it to your back? All that stuff. So, but yeah, speaking of sun and growing season, I think we'll make a slightly convenient transition into, let's talk about these 107.35s. We're so used to seeing mines get this, or sorry, I'm thinking of high altitude here.
Yeah.
we're so used to seeing, drone light shows or something like this with the 107.35s. So fill us in on what is actually the 107.35s, the two that are granted this week.
Yeah, so these are really interesting this week, and always great use cases when we see these things. 107.35 is just a great way to maximize efficiency. So these two went to Spinks Aerial Spraying Solutions and Hive Remote Aerial Solutions. They're both what we're assuming are like agricultural type spraying. They are nearly identical, the two waivers, and it's probably not a coincidence. They came out at the same time, very similar provisions. So they probably know each other, if I just had to guess.
They're spraying buddies for sure, right?
Right. And at least one of the companies, Spinks Aerial Spraying Solutions, it seems like they're probably a full up manned, spraying company. So they already do spraying probably with manned aircraft, and now they're kind of adding unmanned to the fleet to do some of these different things. So, let's just hit on a couple of these provisions quick, and that'll lead into some of this exemption discussion. So you want to cover those provisions quick, Brent?
Yeah, for sure. So there are a few interesting provisions of this waiver. I'll just kind of read through them here. We have them on our website, so feel free to go to that blog today and read those. But number 2 provision, the waiver may be combined with exemption number 18319 as amended. So this waiver may not be combined with any other waivers authorizations without specific authorization from the FAA. Interesting. Do you have any tidbits to add there?
Yeah. So we see oftentimes that waivers can be combined with other waivers. For example, like 107.39s can be combined with 107.29s. So you'll often see that those numbers in these waivers. But to be combined with an exemption is pretty unique, and actually something I've never seen before in these waivers. So we'll talk more about the exemptions in a second, but that's very unique to this. Well, actually, really both waivers. So, yeah.
Right. So these next two provisions are really going to drive into, this last provision I go over will really drive into the conversation here. So let's hit number 10, which just kind of describes the limitations of how many UAS they can operate at one time. So number 10 is, as described in this waiver, operations using multiple UAS are limited to not more than 2 SUAS at a time. So typically with light shows, you can see up to, into the hundreds. However, this is very restricting down to just 2. So that's a pretty modest waiver to 107.35, just to double the capacity. So, so anyways, nothing too crazy there. And then let's go into number 16, provision 16. Prior to conducting operations under 14 CFR 137, under the terms and conditions of this waiver, the remote PIC must pass a knowledge and skills test in accordance to 101. Sorry, I almost said 10.
It's hard to 107, 137. Yeah.
137.19C, or is it E? Sorry, E. Excuse me. Which include operations of more than 1 SUAS at the same time. This knowledge and skills test must be documented in accordance with 137.71. So
what is 137? That's
exactly.
Like, what
and
is
why
this?
is it in and why is it in a 107 waiver?
Yeah.
Right? In a provision. You know?
So
yeah, this is really the guts, right?
Yep. Yeah. So this is where it gets kind of interesting, and then we'll talk about the exemption here. So 137 governs agricultural aircraft operations. So the egg sprayers, that's the regulation that those guys operate under. So when you see those yellow birds flying out there, buzzing the crops, they're flying under 137. So there's usually a pretty high level of safety involved with that, because I mean, these are pretty dangerous operations. They're flying low, they're flying heavy. I'm a manned pilot, a CFI, and it looks like a lot of fun, but definitely be a pucker factor there, flying at like 5 feet over these crops if that was me. So a lot of kudos to these guys, but it does take a very high level of flying skills, stick converter skills to be able to dive down into those fields, spray, pull up. They do these crazy pull up maneuvers, back down. So
that's right.
So yeah, that's all under Part 137, and it makes sense to start adding UAS. I think certainly there's safety for the pilot's sake. One of the big problems though is they just can't cover the ground that a manned aircraft can. I mean, manned aircraft can cover miles of crops all in one flight. Unmanned, they have like a 5-gallon hopper. They just can't do a whole lot. So actually flying 2 at once, that's maybe where you start to get some of that efficiency back if you can fly many small US to cover some of that same ground. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, you just start thinking about why can a manned sprayer cover so much? He has large tanks. He has a lot of onboard payload to dispense. And then when you come down to the UAS, right, SUAS, number one, to keep it under Part 107 regs, you got to be under 55 pounds. So you have a cap right there that's limiting you. So certainly you can have a higher concentration, and you should have more precise aerial applications. So you have some benefits there that can help you out because you carry a lesser payload. But then I start thinking too, just in general, let's talk about the operation costs of manned pilot spraying versus where's the break-even point where you could, we've kind of been discussing this, how you can buy a lot cheaper, items, which would be the drones. And where's that point where you get up to the actual maintenance and operation costs of a full-on manned aircraft? So we haven't done the calculations, but that'd be interesting to do the math on that. Say, okay, I can buy 50 drones before I have to buy one airplane, and then the pilot on top of it costs this much, plus the insurance and maintenance and, yearlies, all that stuff. That would be interesting. So just my thoughts there. I think there is something, once you get to multiple operations of SUAS, more precision aerial applications can help really maybe refine that.
Let's talk about that precision for a second. So I think oftentimes when people think of UAS, their mind is going to like replacing manned aircraft. And so of course that's always like the big part with spraying on unmanned. It can't cover the mileage that manned can. And that's absolutely true. But these are like different use cases probably. So, for one, maybe it has nothing to do with spraying like large crop fields. Maybe you're just spraying for like pests, mosquitoes. If you think about all those standing water in ditches and stuff like that, maybe you can spray those things. Maybe, you can just be much more precise where a manned aircraft could never spray, because they have just such wide areas and overspray and all those issues. So maybe it's not competitive at all. Maybe they're completely, synergistic. The man can cover these large areas, and then the unmanned can really, hit these really precise areas that you have to be mindful of spraying chemicals around people or so on. So yeah, let's talk about exemptions here. So exemptions are kind of like waivers. You want to do some sort of operation that is not allowed by any set of regulation, really. So you probably recall like the 333 days. That was an exemption to Part 91 regulations to do unmanned aircraft ops. So very similar. So both of these waivers reference exemptions, and we kind of dug into them a little bit. And exemptions are nice because you can search them on the regulation.gov, and oftentimes they have, I'll say, like more information kind of behind the scenes than waivers do. You get to see what was submitted, and oftentimes exemptions are open for public comment, so they have to post a certain amount of material on these. So that's it's good. It can actually do some investigation, kind of figure out. So these both exemptions cover the same thing, and we have links to them. And why don't we just kind of run down a couple of these, like just give an example of what these are exempting and some of the challenges here with spraying.
Yeah, so we have a list of exemptions listed here. 107, or sorry, I keep saying this 107.
Well, the first one is 107.
Yeah, so the first one, I was skipping over that one but we can go into it. So 107.36 is carriage of hazardous materials. So this goes to say, when you're dispensing applications, fertilizers, whatever, from, either it's manned or unmanned. In this case, you can't do it. This is interestingly enough, this is not a waiverable provision, or at least regulation under 107. So this is why it is an exemption. We were kind of discussing this early on that, hey, maybe they said, hey, we want to get a waiver to this. And the FAA said, well, actually, you can't get a waiver to that. So here you can have an exemption. And then that brought up some of the questions on why didn't they just get an exemption for 107.35?
Right.
But my gut was telling me that the FAA probably just said, no, we do it this way. So too bad.
Yeah.
It's precedent setting, right? Because if you exempted 107.35, just think about all the smart people out there that would just the wheels would start turning and thinking about other opportunities. But then rolling into 137 regs, pilot in command, obviously there isn't a person sitting in the airplane, right? So exempt from that. What was the other one? Do you have the seatbelt one in there?
Yeah.
So
right.
the very last one, 137.42, you do not have to wear a seatbelt when spraying ag with a drone.
Right. Right.
You can rip off the rest if you want there. I just like that really last one. So
yeah, I mean, all of them are kind of like that at the end of the day, right? So all these regulations were designed with manned aircraft in mind. So wearing your seatbelt, you'd carry your airworthiness certificate in the aircraft. You can't do that for a drone. They have like certain levels of pilot training requirements. So like, I think for example, there's like a minimum hour requirement, and there's actually state laws too that sometimes govern this, but sometimes they're like 700, 800, 1,000 hours. And that's reasonable for manned, to get those skill levels up, because this is a dangerous operation. You don't want just a new pilot doing this. But for unmanned, it's just different. Like
So speaking of these hours here, if you go to regulations.gov, the link that you have, right, Hive Remote Aerial Solutions, they have a statement in there. Our current safety standard remains unchanged. We have managed to complete over 500 hours of flight time and close to 2,000 acres sprayed with 0 incidents. So, keeping those numbers down.
Yeah. So they've already done 500 hours is what he's saying of like spraying.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's all safe.
Yep.
Yeah. Right.
So.
Yeah. So it's just different. We just have to kind of understand the risk of unmanned, how it's different. We still want to be safe, of course, with the unmanned operations, but it just looks different than manned aircraft. So a lot of these exemptions are just trying to kind of find that equivalent level of safety for the unmanned ops.
So real quick too, there are 0 comments, like you were talking about comment period. So comment period on this, on Hive's exemptions, are open on April 1st. So they were entered in on the 31st, and now they're open. So anyways, you can like physically go in there and comment if you'd like. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Interesting.
So just very interesting. So, I mean, and I think it's worth mentioning too, before we move on quick, that, if you are interested in doing spraying with an unmanned aircraft, I think both of these companies are, like I said, probably like existing 137 manned spraying companies. So they understand this very well. They're already, at a level there. But just probably consult with your local FSDO and your local Department of Ag guys. So like one interesting, I guess, hurdle is like these chemicals have labels. The labels will say that they can be sprayed in a certain way from a manned aircraft, or maybe not. Maybe it doesn't specify manned, but maybe there's implications that it's from a manned aircraft. And so unmanned aircraft, they just don't spray the same way. So that kind of, is that label good for unmanned or not? And there's kind of these like gray areas.
Yeah.
So just consult with your local experts. Yeah.
Certainly the intent when developing those labels, they were developed, these chemicals have been used for a while, unless there's brand new chemicals that have just come out recently. But the historic, labels are, with the intent that it's coming from a manned aircraft. Certainly the chemical providers now are going to have to start switching that up and start considering what are the special provisions for use from aerial drones. So one quick comment too is that it's almost like last week how we talked about drone delivery, right? You got your Part 107 drone and you want to go do drone delivery. It's just not that easy, right? There's just so many nuances, right? So now it's Part 135. If you really want to go full scale drone delivery, it's Part 135. Now, if you want to go full scale spraying, right, it's Part 137 that you have to be aware of. So there's, certainly you can go and you can put some homemade, water bottle spray device onto a Phantom if you wanted. And, I'm kind of thinking about like COVID-19 and everything, right, to spray sanitizer, right? But it's just not that easy, right? Even though you could 3D print and rig something up on, your Phantom, your Matrice 600, whatever, it's just, you just can't go do it because there's just all these nuances that are outside of Part 107. So just wanted to throw that in there.
Yeah, good point.
It kind of is ironic that last week we talked about drone delivery. People are trying to find ways to help. And then this week, you could use aerial application to spray disinfectant in areas. But again, not that easy. So
that's a really interesting concept anyways, of spraying disinfectant. It's like, I wonder if there's any studies, because is that really helpful? I don't know.
I don't know.
Without really getting into it, I'm just not sure.
Getting into the weeds there. But there's certainly a lot of press out there, right, for countries overseas that are doing interesting things. Their regs are a little bit more relaxed. So, capping it off, let's close out the episode with answering the question, Mavic Mini, can it map? Jakey, fill us in on what you were doing this weekend.
Yeah. So I don't know if you guys can tell, but we like the Mavic Mini. It's
a sleeper, right? As you said earlier.
It's just for $400, it's pretty hard to beat what you get out of that. So, the obvious use cases are just taking selfies and, cool shots of things, and it's great for that. But we were going
your first drone.
Yeah. Right. Super stable, flies great. But we're going like, wonder if you can do like work with this thing, actually like do something valuable out of that. Yeah. And so, took it out. I guess Brent kind of inspired me. He's like, I wonder if this thing can do some like mapping or modeling. So,
because that's what I've been doing all week is I've been making maps with the Phantom, and I'm like, the Mavic Mini does geotag its photos. I'm like, I bet you can map with it.
Yeah.
So Jakey goes out.
Go out there, and just point the camera down nadir and just fly kind of a manual lawnmower pattern. Take some pictures, give them to Brent, process them, and sure enough, the answer is yes. The Mavic Mini can do mapping, but some caveats. Right. What do you think about that, Brent?
Yeah, so with the other platforms that are designed to map, you have some software that allows you to fly a precise pattern, and you can take photos on a regular interval. Now, I do know that I think you can do time lapses on the Mavic Mini. So you could start the shutter and do a time lapse and fly, so then you don't have to click. But essentially what you have to do with the Mavic, there's no you can't plug this into Pix4D or Drone Deploy or anything like that. Like there's no waypoint missions, at least yet. This will probably be software version coming up. DJI always does that. You talk about it 2 months later.
SDK probably that they need to release for that. Yeah.
Well, they have something for Tello, so Tello, they acquired that. But anyways, so Jakey had to fly the same pattern that you would automate. He flew it manually and took enough pictures. and then kind of describe some of the things that you'd want to do to increase the quality of the map. And he did those. And yeah, if you jump to the website here, we've got a 3D model. We pulled this out of Drone Deploy, and then we serve it in Sketchfab. It's just it's a better way to serve 3D models, so you don't have any logins and all that junk. So go ahead and check it out. And I encourage you to zoom in to the wall that the sun is shining on. It is very high detailed, and this model was made out of 67 photos. So the whole accuracy of the model, to real world. So if you were to go to measure where that concrete wall, retaining wall started on the map versus in the real world, you definitely would have lots of error. However, relative to itself, the map is fairly accurate. So just remember that. So there are definite use cases for this. If you have clients that don't need precision in measurement to correlate your model to the real world, the Mavic Mini certainly can just represent that to itself, its accuracy to itself in a high level. So super impressive. We've been trying different things. I shot a few objects yesterday. Didn't turn out as well. A little bit of challenging items, but we're going to keep pushing the limits of this Mavic Mini and see what we can do with it. So excited.
Yeah. So I mean, and like, why would you even do this? Oh, I have my Mavic 2, my Phantom 4, like whatever. I don't know. Why would I do that? Well, I think just maybe simply from like a risk standpoint, there's benefits. This thing is cheaper. It's lower weight. I mean, things can happen if you do have like a loss of control or something like that. Just far less risk to the property you're shooting, to people around it. Of course, we're mindful of the 107-39s and 23s, so we're flying safely. But just overall risk of a 250-gram drone is much less than Phantom or Mavic. So if it can do the job at lower risk, why not, right?
Yeah. Then also, I was kind of thinking about that too. Why would a professional, right, ever use this? And I was thinking to myself, if you have a team of Part 107 pilots in your business, I think, how often do you have a drone sitting with you in the, like next to you in the seat as you're driving? This, if you're an established business, you could definitely buy a Mavic Mini for everyone, and then as part of their job, you just say you have this thing with you nonstop, because you never know what types of things you could go, like if you're responding to an incident, police officers, this could be a very viable drone at a cost, at a price that's really beneficial for budgets and whatnot. So I just started thinking about that too. It was sitting next to me in the seat, and I'm like, this doesn't take up a lot of room. It's super cheap. And my barrier to entry is, the Fly More combo, because you won't probably want to do that. So $400 and some change, plus a Part 107, so let's just round it. Let's just hopefully we get a Black Friday sale, but everything, $500, you could have your Part 107 and a drone, so yeah, I think that's the power of it. It's the lowest, capable drone at the price point. I don't know what else you can buy that performs this well. I just, flew it last night, and I was just like, man, it flies very, very well for what it is. So
yeah, so we're fans.
Anyways, get out there. Tell us if you've done any crazy things with the Mavic Mini. We've tried to answer the question: can it cut? Can it map? Can you put FPV props on it? We have answers to all those. So we'll put our heads together and see if we can come up with anything else that we can ask the question.
Right.
Mavic Mini, can it do this? Fill in the blank. So
awesome.
Without further ado, I think that wraps it up for episode 21. All right.
Yeah.
Until
again,
next time.
Make sure to answer the question: what is visual line of sight to you?
Yes.
We'll. I think that's a good idea, actually, to get a poll. Maybe we'll get like a little poll with a link in our blog post. So,
right. Right.
But yeah, answer that, and we'll catch you next week, and maybe we'll have some answers for you, or at least results. So
that's right. So take care.
Fly safe.